Hello, everyone. This is Sherry Odom with the Neuroplasticity Alliance, and I am so thrilled today to be speaking with KJ Lavan. KJ is really working at the confluence of mental health with some neuroplasticity and some epigenetics sort of thrown in there. And he is going to walk us through today his discoveries through that journey and what he's trying to create with the United Arab Emirates in the Middle East as part of his initiative, the Brain Matrix. KJ, welcome.
Yes, thank you, Sherry. Thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here. And I want to first commend you on your outstanding commitment to the important work you're doing relative to helping raise awareness around neuroplasticity and the impact it's having on treatment modalities. So thank you for that.
Yeah, thank you, KJ. I really appreciate that. I understand you have some slides you want to share with us today.
I do. So if with your cue, I'll proceed.
Yeah, go ahead. Take it away.
Thank you so much. So bear with me for a moment here while I do that.
There we go. That looks like it's up. All right. All yours.
Right. Great. Thank you so much. So my talk today is titled A Perspective on the Use of Epigenetics and Psychedelics in Mental Health. And so I'm going to share with you and the audience, Sherry, what has brought me on this journey of brain science, something that is very personal and revolutionary, something that I'm very passionate about, brain health. And so we're going to more specifically talk about two new sciences, neuroplasticity and epigenetics, which are revolutionizing not only our personal well-being, but also how we conduct our businesses and hopefully one day, as challenging as it might sound, our politics. I will be presenting how we can help address mental health disorders using psychedelics based on these two new sciences and look at scientific research, clinical trials, and practical applications as it relates to personal stories. I will also touch on a new investment category, which places a premium on healthcare technological innovations and practices that help improve brain health and skills. And this presentation has been prepared for the Neuroplasticity Alliance Innovation Therapy Summit 2022. So this is the overview for my talk today. And I'm going to, again, discuss my journey into this domain, as well as talk about psychedelics and the clinical trials involved with this modality treatment. Also, we'll be talking about personal stories and how epigenetics relates to early childhood development and how that all plays into adulthood. Also, we'll be talking about study centers around the world. And finally, we'll be concluding with some of the highlights I'd like to have everyone take away from my talk today. My vision and initiatives align with the United Nations and World Health Organization Sustainability Development Goals. And I say that because without addressing brain health illnesses, our communities and workplaces will continue to increasingly be challenged to maintain sustainability economically and socially. And so speaking of personal stories, I'd like to start off by talking about my genealogy, my grandmother, and my parents. So in that sense, as a pharmaceutical biotech executive, my background into this whole journey, and these are my parents, my background into this whole journey of brain health really began after seeing my grandmother and my father succumb to Alzheimer's disease. As my mother is now exhibiting the painfully familiar signs and symptoms, I'm on a personal mission to help mine, as well as other families and communities, have a healthy brain throughout our whole life. And so it's estimated that 6.5 million people in the US lived with Alzheimer's in 2022, Sherry. And by 2050, that number is expected to rise as high as 16 million. Yeah. Currently, more than 55 million people live with dementia worldwide. And there are nearly 10 million new cases every year, according to the World Health Organization. These cases are set to triple by 2050. So let that sink in. The gravity of this worldwide toll is like a bright colored neon light flashing the word urgent. And so that said, to highlight the gravity and critical importance of brain health, by 2030, half of the worldwide economic impact of disability will be due specifically to brain-related disability. And the global toll right now, the global toll of brain disorders exceeds that of all other diseases. So actionable steps are needed right now to scale proven population level interventions. It really is about, I like to say, building a brain healthy culture. And so this journey has led me to psychedelic mushrooms, which really opened my eyes as being the holy grail for brain health, if you will. And this is particularly noteworthy in the microdosing world, which we'll talk more about later, where it's shown to actually enhance neurogenesis and synaptogenesis. And rather than declining in brain health as we age, we could actually just continue to get better in synergy with nutrition and movement, as studies have proven and continue to prove. My initiative, the Brain Matrix, is the holy grail for diverse neuroscience-inspired technologies and practices addressing the confluence, as you mentioned, Sherry, of mental health, neurology, education, organizational development, and positive psychology, which of course includes resilience, happiness, productivity. And so it constitutes a promising new investment impact with regard to corporate social responsibility. And the case for the Brain Matrix highlights a new investment category which places a premium, again, on technological healthcare innovations and practices that improve brain health and skills, and namely, right now, psychedelic-assisted psychotherapies. My company, KJL International, it bridges the gap between lifespan and brain span while increasing brain performance for all ages. Right now, I'm focused on the power of plants. Plant medicine is showing tremendous promise for addressing rigidity of thoughts associated with anxiety, depression, PTSD, addiction, etc., which potentiates personal growth. And so as I continue the journey of developing my initiative, one part of said initiative involves the potential of psychedelics as an effective treatment for mental disorders. And it's well recognized, as I stated earlier, that mental illness is a growing worldwide problem, made worse by the COVID-19 pandemic. And that current mental health treatments are often unsatisfactory for many patients, working only partially or not at all, or with intolerable side effects. Against this backdrop, psychedelics have recently emerged as a potential solution to revolutionize mental health care. And there has been a surge in investment in the space to tap into the huge commercial opportunities ahead. That said, there was a huge ramp up in 2020 psychedelics investments, and that accelerated in 2021. Investors have been attracted by a number of things, including increasingly impressive scientific results, larger and more robust clinical trials, continued advances in establishing the legal therapeutic framework, growing public support for step change in brain health, as well as the establishment of the infrastructure to deliver psychedelic-assisted psychotherapies. So, in essence, let's talk about mental disorders. It has to do with rigid brains, brains that have too much order and needs to be disordered a bit, if you will. Psychedelics currently being researched include, but are limited to, psilocybin, lysergic acid diethylamide, which is LSD, MDMA, street name Molly or ecstasy, as well as ketamine. After years of scientific focus on MDMA and LSD, a spike in psilocybin research is changing the geography of the psychedelic landscape. And so in January 2022, a Swiss-based campaign was launched to reform the 1971 United Nations treaty that condemns psilocybin, which is found in some species of mushrooms. Research on psilocybin mushrooms now dominates the psychedelic field, as measured by both clinical trials and scientific publications. Our quantitative look at the depth and breadth of scientific inquiry since 2010 reveals that psilocybin research has mushroomed with over 1,000% increase, exceeding the documented research interest shown in MDMA and LSD. So perhaps the current interest in psilocybin and all things mushroom related owes a debt to the mycelial network, which are those thread-like filaments, sometimes invisible to the eye, that connect mushrooms and fungi underground and around the globe. The award-winning filmmaker Louis Schwartzberg, director of the movie Fantastic Fungi, and a founding member of the nonprofit Global Wellness Institute's Psychedelics and Healing Initiative, has long believed that this is true. So in a world that grappled with COVID-related isolation, mushrooms, especially psilocybin mushrooms, offer a connection to the natural world, forging community and healing in ways that modern pharmaceuticals, even psychedelic medications, don't. Mushrooms can shift your consciousness and make you feel this ultimate connection with all things on the planet. And so that's the shift of consciousness we need right now to care about everybody and everything. This interconnection between us is what makes the world go round, if you think about it. We need it for our economy. We need it for our mental health. And if you look at the different disorders that psilocybin, which is the active ingredient in magic mushrooms, it appears to be effective in treating depression, anxiety, obsessive compulsive disorder, addiction. All of these are mental disorders that involve a kind of rigidity of thought, stuck in loops of rumination. And so people have this narrative in their head that they are a bad person, that nothing is working in their life, or they have this anxiety loop. What psilocybin appears to do is to break habits of looping thoughts. It's kind of a solvent shaking things up in a way that makes the brain more plastic, thus neuroplasticity, and more able to learn new patterns, rewire. Think of your mind as a mountain. I like to use this analogy to help people better understand what psychedelics, and more specifically psilocybin, actually does. Think of your mind as a mountain covered with snow, and your thoughts are sleds sliding down the mountain. After a while, your thoughts are going to keep getting drawn into a track. It's going to be very difficult to get down the mountain without falling into those same grooves of this track. Think of psychedelic experiences as fresh snowfalls filling those grooves, allowing you to take any path down the mountain. Anxiety is being worried about the future. Depression is being a victim of the past. Conversely, psychedelics appears to weaken such mental constructs. And so psychedelic assisted psychotherapy could provide needed options for debilitating mental health disorders, including PTSD, major depressive disorder, alcohol use disorder, anorexia nervosa, and more that kill thousands every year just in the United States and cost billions worldwide in lost productivity. The current wave of interest in the therapeutic potential of psychedelics is something of a renaissance. In the 1950s and 1960s, scientists published more than 1,000 articles on using psychedelics as a psychiatric treatment. The drugs were tested on around 40,000 people in total. Then, as recreational use of the drug spread, they were banned, and the FDA constricted supplies for research. Only recently have neuroscientists and psychopharmacologists, such as Carhart Harris, had the technology to start uptaking how they work in the brain. And so that has given them some insights as to how these compounds might help in psychiatric disease. As a pharmaceutical executive, I'm always intrigued by the science. And in that sense, researchers started exploring the biological effects of psychedelics in the late 1990s using neuroimaging techniques such as positron emission tomography, or PET for short. And they use that before and after volunteers use the drugs, or in conjunction with antagonists that dampen some of their effects. The studies show similarities in how brains respond to psychedelics, such as psilocybin and LSD, as well as dimethyltryptamine, or DMT, which is the active ingredient in ayahuasca plant, and to mescaline, a psychedelic compound derived from the peyote cactus. They all act on receptors for serotonin, a neurotransmitter in the brain that affects mood. Serotonin is also the target of the predominant class of psychiatric drugs that we know, known as selective serotonin reuptake inhibitors, or SSRIs. And it is now thought that these antidepressants work not by flooding the brain with the neurotransmitter serotonin, as was initially assumed, but by stimulating neuroplasticity, the brain's ability to forge new neural connections. And there is some evidence that psychedelic drugs, such as psilocybin, enhance neuroplasticity. Clinical studies also suggest that the biological effects work best in concert with human guidance. The drugs activate a therapeutic-like dream state, intensifying sensory perception, and memories pop up like little films, says Franz Bohlenbieder, a psychiatrist and neurochemist at the University Hospital of Psychiatry in Zurich, Switzerland, and one of the pioneers of the modern era of psychedelic research. He thinks that this receptive state of mind provides an opportunity to help people escape from rigid patterns of thought. And so with that, I want to talk a little bit about microdosing. Microdosing is typically defined by experts as taking 5% to 10% of a full dose of a psychedelic, usually LSD or psilocybin, as a way to get the supposed mental health benefits of the drug without the hallucinogenic high. For instance, in a clinical setting, a 155-pound man might take 20 milligrams, 0.02 grams of psilocybin for a full psychedelic experience. For a microdose, he'd take only 1 to 2 milligrams. At that level, taken 2 times a week, some claim the drugs improve their mood, boost their creativity, and give the world a brighter, shinier quality, like it's in high definition. The onset begins for most people within an hour, and it lasts for about 4 to 6 hours. The ideal client for microdosing has been working on themselves, and I can't stress this enough and emphasize the right mindset when initiating the administration of these psychedelics. Again, it's about people who are working on themselves and have been in therapy, read a whole lot of books, listened to podcasts, have a semi-regular meditation practice. And so you are self-aware, but yet you know there is more to you. And maybe your results have plateaued. Microdosing accelerates a personal growth process that is already underway. And done with intention and structure, it can lead to massive transformation in self-esteem, energy, creativity, relationships. So with that, I believe that to heal and feel alive is a lifelong practice that needs to be as open and dynamic as aliveness itself. With no intention, foundational understanding, self-reflection, or practices to work with the experiences that you have when microdosing, they'll be just that, experiences. And they may appear random or non-existent. So psychedelic medicine is not a shortcut. Again, I emphasize, it is not a shortcut. These medicines are calling us strongly right now, though, and the current interest in them is, I believe, in my view, no coincidence. More and more people know at a deep level that some fundamental pieces need to change. psychedelic medicine asks that we meet it. And these medicines don't want us disempowered. They want us to be empowered. The more power we bring, the more power they bring to us. And when the possibility for change is there, we still have to make it happen. But when we have direction and vision and capacity to think and feel in a way that's new, then these medicines can boost us along that track. We always have the choice as to how we respond to their offerings. That said, we can see this slide here, which shows as it states, psychedelics take flight, particularly with the psilocybin drug. You can see in the gray shaded area from 2010 through 2021, how that particular drug, psilocybin, has taken off relative to the others. And moving on to the other part of this is the publications for psychedelics on this next slide here. And so the psychedelic research found in the online archives of the US National Library of Medicine at the National Institute of Health, published in 2021, shows that in the same year, psilocybin led research interest with 204 research papers, followed by 151 for MDMA and 132 for LSD. This represents a reverse of historical trends. From 1947 through 2021, the total number of publications include 5,622 research papers on LSD, 5,609 research papers on MDMA, and 1,381 research papers on psilocybin. Tabulating these historical archives tells us that of these psychedelics, LSD and MDMA received the lion's share of past research attention, with psilocybin coming in at a distant third with only 9% of scientific research publications. That trend is now over, according to the numbers. Instead, a new chapter in the history of psilocybin as medicine has begun. And it now leads, psilocybin that is, in the number of publications. And we can see that on this next slide. So on this next slide, we can see another key shift in the geography of the psychedelic landscape. And it shows that according to the clinicaltrials.gov website, psilocybin now leads in the number of clinical trials. 62% of psychedelic trials in the world currently recruiting participants are researching psilocybin. Some 17% of psychedelic clinical trials globally are now recruiting participants for MDMA research, and 6% of clinical trials are for LSD research. Other psychedelic clinical trials underway and currently recruiting recipients include DMT and mescaline, the active ingredients of the ayahuasca plant and the ibogaine, respectively. So, of the total clinical trials that were published, MDMA has the greatest number of studies at 265, followed by LSD at 178, and then psilocybin with 109. And so, why psilocybin? I always like to say psilocybin has a quirky advantage for researchers over and above LSD and MDMA. And this is according to Dr. David Nutt, a physician and professor of neuropsychopharmacology at Imperial College London. He says, quote unquote, politicians know how to spell LSD. They know how to spell MDMA, but they don't know how to spell psilocybin. And that has kept them from campaigning against psilocybin research. So in that sense, I'd like to move on to talk about some of the personal case studies that are really showing what kinds of impacts in practical everyday lives this can have for many people. And we're going to talk about Kirk Rudder, someone who was hoping to put finally an end to his depression. Rudder had lived with the condition off and on for years, but the burden had grown since the death of his mother in 2011. And that was followed by a relationship breakup and a car accident the year after. So you can see he was dealing with a lot, and he felt as if his brain was stuck on what he describes as an automatic circuit, repeating the same negative thoughts like a mantra. Everything I do turns to crap. And he says he actually believed that. He, over time, came to this idea of maybe being involved with psilocybin and taking the active ingredient, again, of magic mushrooms. And what he did, he is convinced after the results, he's convinced that the treatment he received in 2015 changed his life for the better. And so in the weeks after his sessions, he found himself wondering whether the automatic circuit would return. He says, I was terrified, and I realized I've got a little bit of control over this. And so the thought had never occurred to him before that, again, he has a degree of control. A week or so later, he was out with friends at a shopping center and sensed the return of optimism and openness. And as he states, it felt like somebody had opened a window in a stuffy room. 5 years later, his depression has not returned. Another individual, Steve Allgood, just 2 days before his wedding, Allgood at the age of 28 was diagnosed with a rare deadly brain cancer with no treatment options available. The oncologist prescribed Allgood to go home, eat burgers, drink beer, and make memories. And so with that, he stayed in bed all day, overcome by distress. He says he was worried all day, every day, and feared death every night. He also came about the introduction to psilocybin, was able to take an approved dose of this medication. And within 30 minutes of his first session, he started feeling the psychedelic effects, which lasted 3 to 4 hours. And the journey of that psychedelic effect ended that afternoon. But Allgood said the enduring effects lasted months. And he stated that psilocybin for him brought awareness into his mind. It was like 10 years of psychotherapy all rolled up into a 6-hour session. And so he further observed that in his mind, he has more of an overall calmness and feeling of gratefulness for life. And in talking about that more specifically, he stated that he was raised in a small town in Ontario with parents who were always working and older brothers who ignored him. He said he had grown up feeling isolated. The psychedelic experience allowed him to uncover the feelings of severe neglect that he experienced growing up. He says, I was a product of my environment, being raised around alcoholics and anger. He noted his type of brain cancer, which is short for diffuse intrinsic pontine glioma, which is a rare brain cancer that affects the top of the brainstem in the brain. And so with that diagnosis and being able to dial into this treatment modality of psilocybin, he reflected that his psychedelic experience allowed him to recognize that his own childhood had been filled with trauma, and also to understand that his parents had used alcohol and anger as a response to their own pain. He shared that this insight brought him a measure of comfort. And as he states, it allowed him to forgive them. The pain and the trauma they caused him was not on purpose, as he realized. And they were just their own hurt individuals, and that they were unconsciously making decisions based on that affected him throughout his life. He also added that it made him see that his parents were reacting to their own generational pain. A sense of expanded consciousness brought him, in that sense, a connection with the universe. And we'll talk a little bit more about that generational pain in a moment through epigenetics. So as you can see from these two personal experiences, psilocybin has a real impact with everyday life and all the things that we may have stored but have never dealt with because they have been suppressed. So on this next slide here, and I apologize in advance for maybe some of the crowded wording, but you can also find this same infographic on my website and on LinkedIn. So no worries. I'm going to be giving a very full descriptive um, uh, element of all of this when I discuss it as we do it right now. So as it relates to the personal story of Steve Allgood, let's talk about how childhood trauma can last an entire life and affect a person's mental and emotional states. So it turns out that this plasticity is not only present in our brain, it is also present in our genes, the field of epigenetics. And again, as the infographic points out, I'm not expecting you to read it here, but one of the three things I really want to dial into is first how epigenetics relates to child development, as well explain how early experiences can have lifelong impacts, and also how young brains are particularly sensitive to epigenetic changes. So you ask, well, KJ, what does epigenetics have to do with neuroplasticity innovative therapies? Okay, well, a whole lot. Allow me to elaborate. Until recently, the influences of genes were thought to be set, and the effects of children's experiences and environments on brain architecture and long-term physical and mental health outcomes remained a mystery. During development, the DNA that makes up our genes accumulates chemical marks that determine how much or how little of the genes is expressed. This collection of chemical marks is known as the epigenome. The different experiences children have rearrange those chemical marks. And so, if you think about it, this explains why genetically identical twins can exhibit different behaviors, skills, health, and achievement. With regard to epigenetics, we're talking about the science of how genes are regulated. We all know that we're born with a fixed complement of base pairs that is our DNA. And for the most part, that will not change over the course of your lifetime, right? But what will change is the extent to which a gene is turned on or off. You can think of genes having little volume controls that is very dynamically regulated. It turns out that our demeanor actually can influence our gene expression. In essence, our epigenetics. More intimately, we can talk about the way a mother behaves toward her infant, the extent to which she expresses love and nurturance. That can induce epigenetic changes in the infant, which will persist for the entire life of the infant. It will also influence its brain wiring, neuroplasticity, and its behavior. And so it turns out from new research over the last few years or so that those changes can be passed down at least a couple of generations. This is not fringe science. This is published in the very best scientific journals in the world. This is very powerful and suggests our quality of mind, the embodiment of virtue, is something that is cellular and will impact all of these different levels of our mind and our body. So to further understand what epigenetics is, I like to use this analogy. Think of a human lifespan as a long movie, okay? And the cells would be the actors and actresses, essential units that make up the movie, right? DNA, in turn, would be the script, instructions for all the participants of the movie to perform their roles. Subsequently, the DNA sequence would be the words on the script, and certain blocks of these words that instruct key actions or events to take place would be the genes. All right. And so the concept of genetics would be like a screenwriting. Moreover, the concept of epigenetics then would be like directing. The script can be the same, but the director can choose to eliminate or tweak certain scenes or dialogue, altering the movie for better or worse. And for practical discussion, Steven Spielberg's finished product would be drastically different than Woody Allen's for the same movie script, wouldn't it? So in that sense, what's the takeaway here? Well, these two new practices, neuroplasticity and epigenetics, will cause a huge revolution, as I stated in the beginning of my talk today, not only in personal well-being, but hopefully also one day in the way we conduct our politics and our businesses. Wouldn't that be something? So in effect, the mind can change the brain to change the mind and genes. Doing this is really valuable because the inner strengths that we all want inside ourselves, such as happiness, positive emotion, productivity, creativity, feeling loved, confidence, all of these are built out of the brain. Psychedelic assisted psychotherapy can serve as a catalyst for treating mental disorders as it relates to early childhood experiences like Steve Allgood's, and thus rewire the brain for optimal mental and physical health. So imagine that, a world of healing bodies, minds, and hearts. On this next slide, these are study research centers all over the world, and these centers are often supported by organizations and institutions such as universities, as well as private individuals. The collaborative efforts of researchers coupled with the support of the FDA has brought about a wave of promising clinical trials showing the benefits of psychedelics. Now that we have moved beyond repressive societal attitudes to psychedelics, the long-standing potential of these substances continue to unfold. So that brings us to the takeaways here. In terms of my talk today, I want to make sure that the impact from this would be mainly of these three highlights that I have here. And the first would be that epigenetics and psychedelics are playing a role in understanding and addressing mental disorders. It is well recognized that mental illness is a growing worldwide problem, again, made worse by the COVID-19 pandemic, and that current mental health treatments are often unsatisfactory for many patients, working only partially or not at all, or with intolerable side effects. Again, against this backdrop, psychedelics have recently emerged as a potential solution to revolutionize mental health care. And there has been a surge in investment, as we just looked at, in this space to tap into the huge commercial opportunities ahead. That said, the second highlight of my talk today is an important caveat, and that is there is a link between depression and neurological disorders, namely Alzheimer's, brain cancer, dementia, epilepsy, mental illness, multiple sclerosis, Parkinson's, stroke. All of these are a critical component of the larger concept, brain health. The World Health Organization estimates that 1/3 of brain disorders accounts for the global burden of all diseases, and it's becoming more prevalent as the population ages. Not only do we have to work diligently to raise awareness, which translates actionable steps for mental health, but we need to address more than just these types of components. We need to address the system itself, the brain. The next item I want to have as a takeaway is brain health is neglected in public health and receives only attention when something goes wrong. Neuroplasticity research illustrates that preventive steps strengthen the brain's component systems. But this information is not widely known. And again, Sherry, that's why I commend you on the outstanding job you're doing, committed to raising awareness around neuroplasticity therapies. And so public health policies can profoundly benefit people at all levels of society to flourish around the world. There is, however, a notable void in policies for the health of the most crucial organ in the human body, the brain. And so this absence is starkly highlighted, again, by the COVID pandemic, where rapidly deteriorating mental clarity and psychological well-being have accompanied sudden adverse changes in economic markets, employment, and social systems. These detrimental effects are magnified by health, social, and economic disparities. By 2030, again, half of the worldwide economic impact of disability will be due specifically to brain-related disability, according to the World Health Organization. And as I stated from at the top of my talk here, without addressing brain disorders, our communities and workplaces will continue to be increasingly challenged to maintain sustainability economically and socially. That said, actionable steps are needed to scale proven population level interventions. Again, my initiative, the Brain Matrix, aims to create healthcare technological innovations and practices that improve brain health and skills for all ages. So please, any of you in the audience, if you'd like to share your expertise, join me and the Neuroplasticity Alliance in helping our communities and workplaces to add not only years to your life, but also adding life to your years. So please, let's collaborate. On this next slide here, you can see my contact information on LinkedIn, WhatsApp, as well as email. I hope this talk today was very informative, insightful, and impactful. And again, I look forward to working with many of you, if not all of you. Thank you so much.
KJ, thank you so much. That's very educational for me. And I have to say, you know, this is a subject that I've certainly explored as part of neuroplasticity. So yeah, thank you for expanding my education and knowledge on that as well. You know, I had a couple of questions for you. And one of the things that really sort of caught my attention was that these the changes in genetics from, yeah, there we go, thank you. So that the epigenetic changes that occur due to environmental impact can continue and be passed down through several generations. Yeah, and so that explains, you know, as you come across different families and your relationships that you develop through life, you notice that there are certain behavioral patterns that exist within those families, and they do occur over generations. And you have to get some age on you, like I do, to be able to see that.
Me included, yes.
Yeah.
Yes, and you're right. It does have a filtering effect in the sense that those life experiences build up to the point where you can actually start to see those patterns. And obviously being aware of it, you're able to take action to help you better live the life that you would like to live. So, but yeah, unfortunately, it all starts from birth. And if the mother is not a loving, nurturing type, that's a big factor in how that child's development will be affected. Again, as you said, and as I talked about, for their entire life. So the epigenetics part of this, I think, with this new science, along with neuroplasticity, is really helping us to better understand why we do what we do and behave the way we do. And so that's a start in enabling us to take action necessary to move us to a better place, if you will. So yeah.
Yeah. And, I think one of the other things that, we both agree on is, and I think most people would, is that brain health is neglected in our healthcare systems systemically. And it's not just a US thing, it is a global challenge. And when you think about that, you I do believe that it's not because people don't recognize it. It's because they don't know how to treat it. They don't know what
Yes.
to do with it. And I think that epigenetics, neuroplasticity, and I do think psychedelics will play a role in that. It gives us a toolbox then
Yes.
to go forward, because I think even psychotherapists out there, the leading ones would tell you that, psychotherapy has had minimal effect
Yes.
and its use over the years. And I think that's why psychedelics in part are being so strongly embraced by that profession, because they do see it as a way to accelerate and combine it with what traditional DBT methodology, et cetera, which is the other real tool they have in their toolbox. Well, one of the other tools.
Right.
And
Right.
yeah, so I do think we see these changes in brain health, or that their changes will occur over the coming decades, because we now have a set of effective tools that can be used,
Yes.
and hopefully that will get integrated in it. And I guess, the research, one of my pet peeves is the research to do this is very much needed to be able to complete that clinical application.
Yes.
And yeah, and I was wondering if you had any more sort of like of the studies that you put up. I know I'm sort of familiar with the one at Johns Hopkins and some of the research it's doing, but are there any sort of anecdotes or information you can share about those studies and the research centers, and maybe are they differing in the areas that they're looking at, or are they collaborating on certain points that they're trying to move that industry forward in?
Yeah. Good question, Sherry. And I think starting out with just the overall understanding of what these study centers are about. We're talking about a dangerous dahlias, of this counterculture, if you will, of these drugs, and now they're gaining mainstream acceptance. And so several states and cities in the US are in the process of legalizing or decriminalizing psilocybin for therapeutic or recreational purposes. I think recently, with this past midterm elections here in the US, Colorado has now joined Oregon as one of the two states that have legalized psilocybin, within confines, of course, and the restriction of the use. And so in terms of the research centers around the world, uh, you have Johns Hopkins, as you mentioned, which is investigating how psychedelics can help patients. And it's currently a leader in that regard in terms of psychedelic research in the US. The Hefter Research Institute, it helps to design and review studies on psilocybin at various research facilities in both the US and Europe. And their research is based on the premise that psychedelics have untapped potential to help people with both medically and that are both medically and spiritually intertwined. So that said, the Center for Psychedelic Therapies and Research is one that's operated through the California Institute of Integral Studies in San Francisco. And its goal is continuing to educate both professionals and the public about current ongoing research related to the medical and psychiatric use of psychedelics. Then, as I mentioned in my talk, Imperial College London is focused on gathering evidence to support the use of psychedelics in therapies and to explore the nature of consciousness, if you will. Also, there is the psychedelic compounds that are currently in research, as I mentioned, the LSD, MDMA, DMT, all of these are showing particular promise, particularly in the sense of being able to get people to overcome their PTSD, and also for treatment-resistant depression, TRDs, which is where a lot of these current therapies are failing to help these people, which means that they've taken at least two types of medications that have failed in their attempt to help them. So those kinds of research and research center collaboration is what we're looking at. And as we move out further in time, there's a ramp up, there's an intensification for these studies to continue to provide the scientific documentation of the efficacy and the long-term effects for these types of applications.
Yeah, one of the things, I mean, I guess I was reading, actually, there was an article in the Wall Street Journal today talking about the legalization framework for this, and how, and so even though it's not decriminalized or it's not legal, it's been decriminalized. And so
Right.
therefore you won't get, you may get like a drug parking ticket, if you will, equivalent for possession, et cetera, because the cultural perspective on it has shifted so much.
Yes.
And it looks like to me the research is really focusing on the correct dosing of these, and still kind of struggling a little bit with how it actually works. And that may be the next phase of research. Once
Yes.
yeah, is that your understanding as well?
Yeah. So, again, as I mentioned in my talk, they think it actually, helps with, first, obviously, you got the stimulation with the serotonin, selective serotonin reuptake inhibitors, but then you have the psychedelics, which can help enhance that neuroplasticity on top of that. But yeah, there needs to be continued study of how these drugs actually work on the level of the cellular and molecular levels. So the input right now, though, is that they are effective, and I would think that based on what we already have, they will continue to move forward and improve these modalities, these treatment modalities with psychedelics, especially to be as effective, if not more effective, than what is currently on the market right now. And so that moves us to a better place to helping people, again, treat whatever illness or diseases they have, or mental disorders they might have.
Yeah, they were, I guess there was another article I read maybe a week or so ago that was talking about the neurogenesis associated with psychedelics, and how, they were measuring the expansion of neurons in over the course of time, and how it just, I can't remember the exact numbers, but it blossoms shortly after taking it, but even affects up to 6 months, it shows continued neurogenesis, but even at a reduced rate. So the effects on neuroplasticity and expanding that ability to shape your mind with the use of psychedelics is extremely extended. So it's not just right after you take it, or,
Yes.
for several weeks or so. It extends in some cases, depending on the amount or the type, for up to 6 months, which I thought was fantastic, because if you think about your capacity to learn, your capacity to change, your capacity to improve your overall mental well-being,
Yes.
because those things are cumulative, right? And that gives you such a large window to be able to make those changes in a positive way.
No doubt. And I think, as I mentioned with one of the case studies, Steve Olga said his effects lasted for months after the administration of psilocybin. And again, as I talk about the right mindset here that has to be part of this, it's to have the right intention and be somewhere in the sense of being aware enough of what it is that you're dealing with to tap into what could be a better place. So without intention and just using it just to be using it, it's not going to do anything in terms of helping you or any, neurogenesis or synaptogenesis that might, be involved here. So I think the other part of it is, you mentioned about how, the legal aspect of it is really one where it's decriminalized. But still, if you're caught selling it outside of the confines of, approved facilities and processes, then you will be, having an arrest and be obviously dealing with a legal matter. So that's always going to be part of it until we get to a better place, and again, not just decriminalize, but make it legal as well. And
That's a good point.
there are also some articles that show that just like marijuana, if you can remember, before it was decriminalized, even now still, there are many underground, transactions, if you will. And so with that kind of activity, you wonder, well, where's this going to play out? Is it going to play out on the space where we can actually legislate and do this above board, or are we going to still have the underground market still playing a factor in that? I think right now, just as marijuana went through that phase, you're still seeing not only the above the board with the legal, the decriminalization, but also there's a lot of underground still going on. And that's just going to be part of it, unfortunately. But again, I think that should not deter anyone wanting to do this in a way that for them it feels right, it's morally correct, and also within the legal confines that they don't find themselves getting in trouble with it. So it's going to be something that I think will play out, and it'll be positive for the most part, if you will.
Yeah, and I guess the ketamine is one of the methods now that is
Yes.
legal, right? So you can
Yes.
access that today at any location in any state.
Yeah, they've got close to 30 centers. They're the only psychedelic approved wellness center in the US right now. With last count, I think it was around 30 or so centers. And so people can, delve into that to get them, the treatment that they need.
Yeah, I mean, from personal experience, both I've got two family members who greatly benefited from that to deal with depression, and it was miraculous, quite frankly.
Awesome.
Yeah. Well, KJ, I appreciate you sharing your expertise with us today, and I'm sure the audience is gonna have a lot of questions and can reach out directly to you.
Yes.
Is there a parting thought you would like to leave with everyone before we sign off?
Yes. Well, again, thank you so much for this opportunity to have this, platform to really share my passion and the expertise that goes with that. And really, the thing I'd like to make sure that everyone takes away from this is that brain health is health. And, whether you have Alzheimer's, dementia, you're dealing with PTSD, all these other neurological disorders is really all about the brain. And so when you take that and really focus on that part of what can affect our lives, then really that's what has to be. It has to be one where that policy or that idea, that concept is head and above everything else. That's where it all starts.
Agreed. All right, that's a great message to part on. Thank you, KJ.
Thank you.